Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me, let's get it, baby. Boys just came back from
Welcome back to the Rockin' Royal Soccer Show, the show for all those who rock the Y on the pitch and from Southfield and beyond. I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com, joined as always by my co-host, former BYU women's soccer star, now ESPN TV and BYU TV analyst, Carla Swensen-Haslam. I call her hashtag soccer guru. We're going with the same one back-to-back weeks, Carla. But thanks, as always, for joining me to talk some BYU footy. As we round up non-conference play a little bit, Big 12 play is on the horizon. You'll be on the call Thursday. We'll get into that into a minute. But first of all, how's your Monday morning on a Tuesday going?
Oh man, it always feels rough. But maybe that's just because it's like the changing of the seasons, right? We got all the summer fun behind us. Now we're getting into like more fun, but it feels different. Weather's starting to change. So it's coming up rough, but it's okay. What better way to lighten the mood and lighten the day than to talk some footy?
Yeah, I noticed that it's finally fall just this past weekend when I was flying back from the football game at SMU in Dallas, and I got into Salt Lake International about 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, which normally in the summertime, you get in 10:30 or 11, you're talking 88 degrees, 90 degrees, 95, maybe pushing 100 by that point because it gets really warm in Utah in the summer. No, it was like 78 degrees, and it felt like a balmy 78 degrees. So fall is here. I guess not technically, not officially. It's late September or whatnot, but it really is starting to feel a little bit more like fall, and it's starting to feel a little bit more like soccer season. I won't lie. BYU wraps up non-conference play this past week with a much needed, I'll say, home win 2-0 against Boise State. And then they go on the road to number 6 Arkansas for a 4-2 loss in Fayetteville. A little bit of a tough one there. And then I thought they did a lot of good things against Boise State. So let's start right there, Carlo. How necessary did this win against Boise State feel? This was a team that they started hot. They were 3-0, 4-0 on the season. They were unbeaten on the year. BYU hands them their first loss, these Broncos, and they came after them. They were really physical, played in a way that I think a lot of Big 12 teams like to play. Like this felt like a sort of a mini Big 12, like a Big 12 light, if you will, in some ways, just this style of play. For BYU to snap their three-match winless skid, 2-match losing skid against the Broncos. That's just, I feel like some wins you kind of need, and that felt like a win that this team needed in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's interesting they say that because I saw it as like a cannot afford to lose. So it's one of those things that you almost feel that relief just to get the win rather than the excitement. I mean, every victory deserves excitement, right? But it was one of those games. I don't think BYU could afford to lose that simply because you're right. They had gone 3 games prior without getting a win, without scoring a ton of goals. And I think that if they had lost to Boise State, that would have been really tough on their morale because A, it's a team that they should be beating just based off rank, based off RPI, based on like statistics. And then you don't want to go 4 games. That just feels excessive to go 4 games without a win. And so all of that put together, I think it was one of those cannot afford to lose. And fortunately for BYU, they didn't. They came away with the win. Always feels good to win at home. It's one of the first weeks that students are now back, and so it felt different to have such a large presence of students, even though it was competing with football. And so it's like it's actually quite impressive considering that there were other major sporting events going on, and that BYU was still able to like bring out a big crowd and bring out a large, significant number of people in comparison to like other teams when their football teams are playing at the same time. So I think it was very much a victory for BYU, but very much more a relief because it makes them feel like they're still in this and they still have chances and they're still going to be okay if they're beating the teams that they should beat.
Ella Labram and Hallie Dixon with the goal, 2 freshmen getting their first markers in BYU uniforms. I thought that was pretty necessary as well. Kind of a nice side note for this club that we've talked about how young they are. To see a pair of young players get rewarded for some of what they're doing. Hallie Dixon in particular, her goal, you've probably seen it all over social media by now if you weren't watching it live. An absolute stunner. She pulls up from 30-ish yards away, and kind of has a look on her face of like, should I shoot it? Should I shoot it? Yeah, I'm going to shoot it. And then just tags the upper 90 perfectly. Great goal. Fantastic goal by Hallie as well. Sort of one of those when you're watching it, if you're watching it as a coach, as BYU has plenty on their team right now, unfortunately due to injuries, you kind of look at it and you go, no, yes, type of a goal. In some ways, unless of course you're Ellie Wahlberg, who was calling for Hallie to shoot from the moment she got the ball. She admitted that to me. You could actually hear her on the broadcast when Hallie was about 35 feet away from goal. You hear somebody just yell, "Shoot it!" Yeah, that was Ellie Wahlberg. I got that confirmed from her and whatnot. So,
She believed from the
yeah,
beginning.
So Coach Wahlberg obviously very much believed in Hallie Dixon on that goal. BYU then traveled Saturday evening to Razorback Field to face the number 6 team in the nation, Arkansas. Again, another part of just a absolutely brutal non-conference schedule, one that you will hope pays dividends down the road, but it didn't pay dividends on Saturday. A 4-2 loss. Aaron Bailey came back from an injury or illness. Aaron Bailey came back from an illness in that game, scored her first goal of the year, and then Tara Warner found the score sheet as well. Second goal of her career, first of the season. This was a tough one. The Hogs outshot the Cougars 19-13, which is the most shots BYU has allowed in a game this season, including 12 shots on target, 6 of which were parried by goalkeeper Lynette Ernez. So a tough one to end non-conference play on, I think, Carla. But when you go through moments like that, how do you learn from those moments as a collegiate soccer player? Because this was the worst loss of BYU's non-conference tenure. Again, against a very good team. I don't want to downgrade anything that Arkansas does. This is a BYU podcast, so we are going to focus mostly on BYU. So how do you learn from a moment like that and take it into the second season, I guess, where everything kind of resets? Everybody's 0-0 conference play beginning this Thursday.
Yeah, no, I think there's a great question. I think there's multiple approaches that you can take to it. You know, on the surface, probably the biggest lesson is that you can't let in 4 goals because BYU did score 2, right? So BYU did get on the score sheet, which is, has been, I think, their biggest issue this year is scoring goals, and they did score 2 against the number 6 team in the country. This Razorbacks team is an excellent team, has players that will be All-Americans. No doubt that Arkansas will make it to the NCAA tournament. And so the fact that you scored 2 goals on them is a really good sign from both Aaron Bailey and Tara Warner. The fact that a defender scored, I think, is a good sign too, because it shows that BYU started to get their defenders up into the attack. So I think if you want to focus on the good, you can say, okay, what was the good that came from this game and how do we reciprocate that? Because if you can do it against a number 6 Arkansas, you can probably do it against any other team in the country. And that's get your defenders up high, and that's score goals on really talented defenses. So I think that's something that they can take now that they go into Big 12 play, because they'll be playing teams that perhaps have a similar style of soccer to that of Arkansas. I think the real question is don't give up 4 goals, which is a bit surprising because BYU's defense has actually been, I think, the strongest part of their team this whole season. I will give it credit to Arkansas and their coaching staff. They know how to prepare for BYU. Every time I watch Arkansas play BYU, you can tell that they have strategically prepared for BYU specifically. And a lot of it just comes down to coaching style and changes and personnel changes made at halftime. And so I give this Arkansas team credit because I think their past wins against BYU have all come from strategically preparing for BYU. And that I think is what allowed them to just win. And I think it's just hard to win in Arkansas too. I've spoken with so many of the girls about it, and they say it's just a hard place to get to and then to play at. And so it's hard to keep that sort of momentum up. And so all of these things put together, I think, are things that BYU can learn from, because this isn't the only, long distance game that they're going to be playing this year. In the Big 12, they're going to have some really long trips. And if they can use Arkansas as perhaps a meter to get that experience and get that behind their belt of like, yeah, we're going to have to play some long road games, perhaps it'll be helpful for them when they start traveling for conference play.
Yeah, Fayetteville, I can confirm, really tough place to get to. Plus, you got the heat and humidity of Western Arkansas that doesn't help. A really good crowd on hand at Razorback Soccer Field as well. There, you saw a lot of blue in the stands, a lot of BYU fans. They traveled, but these Arkansas fans know how to support their Hogs as well. That's probably one of the more hostile environments BYU will face this year. So again, good experience, good learning moments. I think it's a good road trip for a team that started that all the last week started as many as 4 freshmen, 4 sophomores in their starting lineup, kind of getting that first college soccer experience in a lot of ways. So you hope it pays some dividends down the road. And I like that point about the travel as well, because this Big 12 play, it's not quite as loaded as BYU soccer was last year, but they still got a couple of decent-sized road trips. Obviously, they start this Thursday at home against Arizona State, but then they're right back on the road traveling to Fort Worth against TCU. For my money, the top contender in the conference, or certainly one of them, I think. Then later on down the road, a couple matches later to start October, they're going to be in Tucson against Arizona. They're going to head out to Addie Merrick Park in Lawrence, Kansas, for a match against the Jayhawks. I call it Addison Merrick Park in honor of the shared Utah-Kansas connection. Addison Merrick, formerly of Utah Royals FC. That's probably well over a lot of people's head, but the voice of the Royals, Carla Swensen-Haslam, laughs a little bit, so I appreciate it.
I got that.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting too, Sean, as you mentioned that, is I'm thinking about what is the long-term effects of Arkansas on this team. And honestly, as much as BYU wants to get a win against Arkansas, I don't think this hurts them at all when it comes to RPI and scheduling. This isn't one of those losses that I think the NCAA is going to look at and say, "Ooh, like that hurts them RPI wise," or that hurts them, when we're determining who should go to the tournament or not, because Arkansas is so good. So losing to them, losing to a UCLA, really doesn't hurt them as much as they want to win.
Right. Well, and on that note, let's use that to kind of transition into all of non-conference play, because Cougars do put a bow on the non-conference portion of their schedule. First season or second season, I guess, exhibition, and then non-conference, however you want to phrase it. It's a little bit of a new year, starting with Big 12 play on Thursday. So BYU finishes their non-conference slate 2-3-2 overall. And I know those numbers don't jump off of the page for a lot of BYU fans. They're obviously used to a little bit more. This team is used to a little bit more, but 2 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws. And I don't feel like, you're right, any of these 3 losses are really that damaging to this BYU team. On the road at then number 3 UCLA 1-0. That no loss is truly a good loss, but that's not a bad loss by any means. Obviously, that one to Arkansas, a top 10 team right now. And then the other one, a home loss to Utah State, 2-1, at the time the number 19 team in the country. That win, I guess, for the Aggies vaulted them up to number 11. They're a top 10 team now, as well as they open the season 7-0, and arguably the lead contender in the Mountain West Conference. Like, this is a very good team as well, kind of on that same level. So I don't feel like any of these 3 losses really do a ton to damage anything on anything on BYU schedule, outside of maybe a little bit of morale, a little bit of a take it there. But again, if you can learn from those moments and be better for Big 12 conference play, then I think in a lot of ways they're kind of worth it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking long term. And you talk with Coach Rockwood and her staff, and they say, we are not just worried about this season, we're already planning and preparing to build next season. And so these type of big games against talented teams, I think, are only going to help with that long term. They're only going to help with your RPIs. There's no point in playing a bunch of little weak teams, but then actually hurting your RPI because you can blow out a bunch of little weak teams. And so I still think it's wise to have a really tough schedule, even if it's in a building year, even if your team, is going to take some losses. I still think it's wise in the long run just because it prepares your team for conference play and it does prepare them for the future.
Those 2 wins, we will mention the season opener, then 1-0 over the number 19 Wisconsin. That has since dropped the Scotties, the Badges, outside of the top 25. And then that other win, we mentioned it earlier, at home against Boise State. 2 draws in there as well. St. Louis 1-1, and then at Long Beach State 1-1 on the season for BYU women's soccer. So all of that, again, in anticipation of building up for this Thursday at 7 o'clock Mountain Time at Southfield, BYU, Arizona State. You can catch it on ESPN Plus if you're not one of the lucky 4,500 or 5,000 people that are there at Southfield. And I expect a full house for this one, Carla. You'll be on the call for that game, returning to your ESPN Plus duties as well. What are you expecting from this Thursday? Let's go even before we talk personnel and matchups and strategy and that kind of thing. The last, you touched on it a little bit, the last home game against Boise State was rocking. It was one of the first days of classes. Students are finally back in session. You can feel that at Southfield, even for this team that hasn't had the results always go their way. What are you expecting on that end from this Arizona State match, Big 12 opener, Thursday night?
Yeah, I expect similar energy, if not more. Students are getting back into the swing of things. They're starting to see how fun women's soccer can be, even for those that are not women's soccer fans. But that the Southfield just brings a fun energy, and it's a fun climate and place for the rock section to go. So I think you have even non-soccer, non-sport students who just come to have a good time. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of people. I think the weather's still nice. We have not yet gotten into these cold November games, which we will get to, that are just
They're
absolutely
coming.
miserable. Yeah, they're coming and they're absolutely miserable and they're freezing cold. We're not there yet, right? So everyone's still going to be in their t-shirts and having fun. So I expect it to be really high energy. And then also because conference play begins and everyone's still really hyped up about the Big 12. And so it put into consideration that other sports teams have been winning too, right? We think of football, we think of women's volleyball, have also been winning games. And so you put all the hype together, and I think it makes for a perfect place to watch women's soccer.
ASU coming into town 5-0-2 on the year. Yes, they are in some ways maybe the opposite of this BYU team. Unbeaten on the season, still yet to suffer their first loss. They're on a I can do math, basic math right here, 4-game winning streak as well, following a Sunday afternoon win over Utah Tech 2-1, a game that they didn't actually lead these Sun Devils until the final 25 seconds of this game. So shout out to the Trailblazers. They've actually had a really nice start to the season themselves. Again, this is a BYU podcast, so we won't focus on it too much, but a really nice start from another in-state team. A lot of Utah college soccer right now is on a really good level, I think, at the moment. But so is this ASU team, which comes into the year unbeaten. They're led in scoring by a freshman, Kiera Blundell, freshman out of Langley, British Columbia, Canada as well. She's got 5 goals, 3 assists on the year. So another little bit of a young team. They've got some spot seniors here and there, a couple of transfers that are contributing as well. But you look at the schedule, I think there's a lot of confidence builders for this Arizona State program. Wins over teams like Wagner, a 5-2 win at LSU, I think doesn't hurt for confidence by any means. I know LSU isn't quite this year what they've been in the past, but still a solid team. I would even say a very good SEC team, maybe not quite on like the elite level, a la say in Arkansas, but still a very good team as well. And then they've got wins over Grambling State, over Penn. I mentioned that win over Utah Tech as well. And then a couple of draws with Northern Arizona and Little Rock. So a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of their unbeaten start to the season. But you got to think that breeds confidence for the Sun Devil squad looking to come into Southfield and steal a result or steal a point or whatever soccer terminology you want to use as they now transition from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you would think so, right? I mean, they are undefeated. It's one of those things where they're undefeated, but I put a huge asterisk on it because I haven't been impressed with these undefeated wins. You had mentioned the best team they played is LSU, but LSU, you're right, very much is rebuilding this year too. And so I think BYU will by far be their biggest challenge. And I don't know how I feel if I'm a Sun Devils fan going into this game, knowing that the hardest game that you will play will be your very first conference game. That's going to be tough. But nevertheless, it doesn't hurt to say you're undefeated. It doesn't hurt to have a freshman scoring a bunch of goals. And so even though, little Carla may be unimpressed with the Sun Devils non-conference play, maybe that's what they need, right? Maybe their coaching staff, no doubt, knows the personnel better than I do. And perhaps that coaching staff recognizes that this is a Sun Devils team that maybe needs to get wins under their belt in order to do well in conference play, right? Maybe it's such a young team that the morale of the team it's more important to get wins than to get, big competition. And so you give the coaching staff the benefit of the doubt that the reason they scheduled an easier non-conference play is because maybe that's what the team needed. But like I said, I would be very nervous going into this game because BYU, even though they haven't been, performing as well as perhaps in years past, is still going to be a very, very dangerous team. And it's still going to be the hardest team that they've played all year. And that will be their opener for conference play.
Yeah, this is still a BYU team that was picked to win the Big 12. Again, probably based more off of last year's results and what this club brought back, but they still but that just means they still have a lot of respect from these Big 12 coaches, Big 12 programs, even some of the newcomers, Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado as well. So this is still viewed, BYU, as the team to beat in some ways, maybe even despite sort of some of their struggles in non-conference play, that tough schedule, brutal schedule in plenty of ways as well. Again, for my money, I would probably put I love what TCU is doing. I think Texas Tech has actually rebounded very well from losing at least arguably their best player to a torn ACL at the start of their preseason / non-conference play. I think that I think Kansas has started very nice. I think UCF has had some really good moments as well. So I don't know if BYU is the team to beat, but I know that based off of Jen Rockwood, based off of this program, based off of 2 College Cup semifinal appearances in the last 3 years, I know this is a team that is going to be prepared by opposing Big 12 coaching staffs as if they are the best team in the conference. And they'll probably see a lot of looks as if they are the best team in the conference as well. I expect no less from Arizona State. By the way, this ASU, quite the opening late to their Big 12 play. They're at Southfield in Provo for that opener on Thursday, like we mentioned. Then they have to turn around and travel to Houston next Thursday, that's September 19th. Then they're at UCF in Orlando on the weekend before
That's a lot of travel.
Yeah, that's a lot of travel before finally getting back home Thursday, September 26th against West Virginia. They've got a couple at home for that one, 3 in a row, including October 4th against that team up north, the University of Utah, as well. So a little bit of a tough start to league play for ASU, and I'm sure they would love to get it started on a high note with some kind of a result against the preseason favorites in BYU.
Yeah, that is going to be a rough month of travel, and like some really talented teams too. So I'm interested to see how it plays out for the Sun Devils. Maybe they are really that good and didn't need to play, big difficult teams in their non-conference play. I mean, so it's one of those things we'll just wait and see. And soccer is such a wild sport that it's hard to predict what is going to happen. I still think that Thursday's match will be a competitive game. You know, as much as I'm like, criticizing their non-conference play, I still think Thursday will be a very competitive game. I think that ASU does a good job recruiting. They recruit a lot of players that are really good and really talented, really athletic. So that being said, I still think it'll be very competitive on Thursday, and I think BYU will have to prepare accordingly.
Yeah. as we sit here and talk about ASU schedule, we will also note some of these teams that you're probably thinking, well, why is an ASU program kind of filling up their non-conference play with them? Utah Tech was 3-0-2 before losing their first loss of the year to ASU, to Arizona State. So some of these quote unquote lower level teams, as we may say, have been having really good seasons. They've got some really good quality, really good years. Shout out to the Browns down there at Utah Tech for doing work right now on the recruiting scene and really kind of turning around that program in a big way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's not a diss on them at all. If anything, the program is improving and continues to bring in big recruits.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think this ASU team is going to be confident, and it's up to BYU to match that confidence level again, coming off of their worst loss of the season so far, 4-2 to Arkansas. Can BYU respond, or is that Razorback loss going to lead to back-to-back losses in some ways, including with Arizona State? I think that's the biggest question I have for this BYU program as they now turn the page from the non-conference to a look at the Big 12. Carla, anything else that we didn't really touch on about BYU's non-conference schedule as we kind of close the book on that and moving forward into league play?
I don't think so. I think it's been a good learning experience for BYU. I think it's been telling for the fans. I think we have a few more answers than we did a month and a half ago, but there's still so many questions that I think we won't know for another couple of weeks, and that's okay. It just shows that it's a team that's growing and developing, and maybe they're saving the best for the final dance. We'll have to see.
Let me surprise you. I'll get you out of here on this. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, so we don't need to dive too much into the specifics. Who's your BYU non-conference MVP? Who have you been the most impressed with from this non-conference season from this BYU women's soccer program? And then we'll officially close the book on it.
Like personnel from the squad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm putting her on the spot a little bit. I did not prepare this at all. This is very much an
and that's okay. That's
for the listeners.
And that's okay. If I'm quiet, it's because I want to give you a really deliberate, very well thought out answer. I think Mackenzie Vance has exceeded expectations. I think we all knew that she would be good. No one ever doubted her. But I think she has come in and exceeded expectations and has just been kind of a calming presence in the midfield for this BYU squad. And so I think that is reassuring. And she's probably my MVP so far, not because she's gotten tons of goals. She has 1 goal to her name right now. But just because she has exceeded expectations and stayed pretty steady, even through what has been kind of an unpredictable month for this BYU squad. And so if I had to pick one person, I would probably pick her.
That's a good move. And the thing I like about Mackenzie is she's finding herself more and more.
So you'll have to let me know, Sean, and we'll see how conference play goes.
Yeah, and the thing I really like about Mackenzie is she's finding herself more and more.
I think so too. I think she's consistently progressing. I agree. So we'll see. We'll see how conference play looks, and if there's any other players that are rising stars.
I'm gonna go on the other side of the coin and give my non-conference MVP. I'm gonna go co-MVPs here. You probably know where I'm going on this one because I've talked about both of these players a lot on preceding episodes of the podcast. Again, if you're not following Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere else that you can get podcasts, we love a rating, we love a review. You can say whatever you want about us in that review, by the way. If you leave 5 stars, you can say whatever you want. Criticize me as much as you want. That's totally fine. Not Carla, but criticize me. But I'm going to go non-conference co-MVPs to the center back tandem of Tara Warner and Avery Frischknecht, coming into a really tough spot and leading a back line that was being rebuilt on the fly, bringing in a true freshman in Presley Freeman, who I thought has been really good. I could maybe give her my non-conference MVP, but I'm going to give it to Avery and Tara for kind of corralling that back line. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, really leading a defense that has kind of led this BYU team. They've been struggling to find goals at times. Their midfield has been messy. We'll say messy at
Yeah.
moments. I think they're getting better, but they've definitely been really young. They've made some young mistakes. Even players like Mackenzie Vance are still kind of learning that system as she makes a move from UCLA to Provo as well. But that back line overall, more often than not, I know that 4-2 score line against Arkansas looks weird right now, but more often than not, I think that back line has been really good. And I think it's credit to Avery Frischknecht and Tara Warner there at center back in front of Lynette Ernez, the goalkeeper, as well. So I think the defense has been just so much better, light years ahead of where I thought they would be by this point in the season. And I've got to give a little bit of a nod to that defensive presence as they move forward into conference play as well. So on that note, we'll wrap up and put a bow on the non-conference portion of this season. BYU women's soccer once again opens Big 12 play this Thursday, 7 p.m. Mountain Time at Southfield. You can catch that on ESPN Plus with my co-host, former BYU women's soccer star and hashtag soccer guru for all things BYU TV and ESPN Plus, Carla Swensen-Haslam. Carla, as always, thanks again for joining me on the podcast. And signing off, I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com, saying so long and see you on the pitch.
Rockin' Navy, know you with me. Let's get it, baby. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me. Let's get it, baby.